it was frustrating because I was like, you got to be kidding me! I can't even download an app. Free one, nothing. It
I
didn't
know.
matter what. It wouldn't even let me download a free one, and
Are
I'm
you
like,
live
I've got
now?
to
Are
get
you
this
good?
figured out.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to add frustration because I know I hate when I have to do things that like it doesn't actually even matter and it's then frustrates me for no good reason. So
Right.
really sorry.
No,
Sorry
you're
about
good. No, I needed to do it. It had to be done.
that. Well, thank you so much for being on the score. Do you listen to podcasts? You
I
can say
do
no.
some. I do listen to like the Dan Patrick Show and stuff. So
The Dan
do I
Patrick
listen?
Show.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Sports podcast, pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Your brother also tells me that he listens to sport podcasts because mine needs to be really good for him to start wanting to listen to it. So
Well,
hopefully one of these days.
I'll listen to it now because now I'll know where to listen.
Good. Good. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Well, hey, so I don't know, I want to talk about Walt because we've been doing these special horse episodes, and we did one on Scooter. That was
Right.
kind of the first one we did. And so obviously Walt has to be on the list if we're doing episodes with all the great horses. Um, there's no way to do one without doing Walt. So I
Well,
don't
I
know if you're
appreciate that.
I don't know if you're sick of talking about the horse yet or not. Like, can you get sick of talking about him?
No, because he was family to me. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think you ever get sick of talking about family. So I mean, to me, it's like a lot of these kids that are 20 years old. And that was 9 years ago that he died. So uh, it was it was a long, long time ago. These kids don't even probably remember him a lot of times. So I mean, yeah, I love talking about him. I think he's the greatest horse there's ever been. I'm partial to him, of course, but I mean, he just did so much stuff that I see a lot of horses, and I've been on a lot of horses that they can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think we learn so much from kind of talking about and learning about these great horses. It teaches a lot. So I'm glad you are not sick of talking about Walt. Um, yeah, absolutely. Now, so his registered name was Precious Speck. Tell
Yes.
me he was born. Tell me about Walt that raised him. How did you know the man who raised this horse?
Well, he lived in the Northwest, which it's about 7 hours from us. So we'd see him occasionally at jackpots, and about once a year. And we just, they had the BDR Classic in the fall in October when we were younger, and that's when we'd see him, and you'd see him around occasionally at some jackpots, but we didn't run into him a lot. We just knew that he roped good and he had good horses.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was actually calling around looking for horses, and he called Rich Carpenter, and Rich Carpenter is the one that's good friends with him, lives up in Kalispell, and which Walt was over by Polson area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he goes, if I was looking for one, that's what I'd go try. So
Now let's take it back. Do you know what how much did Walt ranch on this horse? What was his background before he was 10 by the time you got him, right? So
yeah, he was
how
10. And well, when we went up there to try him, funny story is he showed up, he was unloaded out of the trailer, saddled on. I mean, it was probably, I don't know, it was probably 8, 9 o'clock at night. He was at a jackpot, tied off, heeling on him
mm-hmm,
at a round robin earlier
mm-hmm,
that day. And then, when we woke up at 7 in the morning, every horse was saddled on his place, standing there eating, including him. And
mm-hmm.
he said that he rode him and ranched on him out there. And he told me, he said he's not a kid's horse because uh, when he was raising John Vermendal, that he was riding him and he run off with him out in the pasture.
Hmm.
So he just knew, and he just rode him, and he just ranched on him and did all the cowboy stuff he'd do. In fact, I tried him in split reins and no tie down. So we put a tie down on him right away because I'm like, hey, I think we're going to need one. So
So when you put a tie down, was he overwhelmingly fast at the beginning? Like, did you have to do anything to him, slow him down, anything like that? I mean, obviously you didn't slow him down long term, but did you have to back him off or anything?
the one thing that he wasn't used to doing a little
Mhm.
bit was he stood there and scored pretty good, but when Walt had him, his box was like 20 some feet long, like
Mm-hmm.
World Series type stuff now,
Mm-hmm.
before there was ever World Series type stuff. Well, he would just start him 18 feet. Like he hardly ever backed him into a corner. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I tried to back him in the corner, he had an indoor arena and he wanted to stay about 6 inches off the back. And that was, so he was just, it didn't take him long to get over that, but that was just one of the things. And then as far as roping on him, he just knew to run to the steer. Walt run all the way to the steer, roped him, and he knew that he was supposed to go there. So the only thing that I really had to do to him was just refine him on the scoring just a little bit. He scored great. I mean, when I say refine him, I'm just rodeo type stuff, and then get him quick enough to where you could win on him, because at first he was hard to be 5 seconds on, because you
Mm-hmm.
rope and he'd keep going to the steer.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me about, I don't know, 3-4 months of just jackpotting on him, riding him, and Clay riding him, and we both rode him throughout the winter. And I remember riding him at Denver, and we started getting going. And about the time Austin come around in March, you could tell that he got it figured out. And then it was just from then on, it was just rope, get after it.
So I guess I have a lot of questions about the early. So first of all, how did he become your horse and not Clay's horse? How did Clay not need a horse at the time?
I think Clay had just bought one before that,
Mm-hmm.
and then I didn't own one,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd won enough throughout the summer healing to make a down payment on him, and
Mm-hmm.
then we made a deal that I had to pay so much by the first of the year, and then when I did good, I had to pay another, finish paying him out. If we didn't do good on him, then the price was that. If we did good on him, then the price was going to be this. So
Mm-hmm.
my healing, basically, the ironic thing about it is my healing actually bought him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how it went about. So he was mine, and I went and won good healing, and then I did good at the U.S. finals and won, which would be the 13 now, won the 9 down there with Britt Williams, and I was good to go. Rodeo for then it was game on.
How much healing did you do on him? You said healing paid for
I
him, but
didn't
was it
do any
healing?
I didn't do any healing on him unless I had to rebuild at a rodeo, and that only happened a couple times. But
Those were the days, huh?
oh man, those were the days. People don't even know that you had to rebuild sometimes in the short round or at the NFR.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so I never had to heal on him at the NFR because I threatened any of my healers, if I miss, don't you dare head him. Don't you even think about it. He wasn't bad to heal on. In fact, one day I was just going to exercise him, and I was like, man, I'll just heal some on him because it'll be easier on him. I don't want to turn him off. So I was just going to hang back. And I think it was at Wade Wheatley's. I know it was. Wade run up there and stuck one, and just snappy as Wade is, squared him up good. And I'm just thinking, oh, we're just going to I'm going to have to ease him in there. And son of a gun, I about fell off the right side just because he just got in. He just went in there like he was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And if I would just heal on him, he'd be all right. But I mean, he was just a little strong and a little free to be really good at it.
Mm-hmm. Now, had you ridden a lot of horses with that much thoroughbred in them before or that much run to them? Did you like that kind of horse before you got him?
I'd never rode any. I mean, I rode some good ones, but I never rode like he was like he as hard as he'd run. Once he got the rating part figured out, once he figured out what you wanted him to do, I think that's what made him so great. Is he would love to compete with you. Like you're at Cheyenne, steers out there 30 feet and running, and he's probably out there more than 30 feet by the time you actually hit the
Mm-hmm.
barrier, even if you get a really good start. And he run as hard as he possibly could, harder than he would on a normal setup, until you got to the spot where he felt like you were going to rope, and then he'd rate off and let you rope. And then
Mm-hmm.
he would never overrun the situation anymore. So whether you were at the NFR or at Cheyenne or at just a longer setup, he competed right along with you. So if you wanted to run in there, he'd go all the way to him. He could kind of feel you. And if you wanted to go at him a little bit, he would go ahead and rate a little sooner to give you a chance to be fast.
That's awesome. That is awesome. When was the first time you realized that he was great? Like, what was the moment that you were like, wow, I have the best head horse of all time? Did it take a while, or did you feel that pretty early?
Well, I knew I had something pretty special when it was I bought him in Labor Day weekend,
Hmm.
and then Billings, the Nile was in October. We went to that, and then we went down to the U.S. finals. And man, I guess I would have been 19 at the time, and I was roping with Matt Robertson. Well, we were what would be a 15 team now,
Hmm.
and after two in the Open, we're leading it on two, and Clay comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I wouldn't sell that horse for nothing. My brother did."
Hmm.
Just in case someone asked. And I kind of knew then, I was like, man, it felt just real easy. Like it was
Hmm.
like, man, I mean, we didn't do any good later on, but that wasn't his fault. That was, I can't even remember what happened, but I knew at that point that I had something that was pretty good. And then the more we rode him and watched Clay ride him, right, well, we'd be buddied, so we'd have to get a split. So he'd rope or I would rope, and then three, you'd have a 3-team split maybe or two, and then he'd come back right on there, and we'd both do good. And then he kept working like it was no big deal. While everybody else is, half the head horses are ducking out of sight by the end of July, he's still just probably the first year right around midsummer where you're like, man, we're both riding him, and he's still just basically better than everything out here and working more consistent than anything.
Hmm.
I think that was kind of about that time. And then, I mean, as far as like greatness goes, to me, like greatness is you got to have some longevity with your career. Like there's been a lot of really good horses. And if they would have lasted 10 years, they might be, some of the best of all time, but they might have only lasted 2 or 3,
Hmm.
injury or something like that. So I think that point I knew I had probably the best one going at the time. I just didn't know, my gosh, I didn't know he was going to do what he did.
What he did and
Had
last this long. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. I knew he was tough, but I mean, tough all you can be tough all you want.
Hmm.
And that was, I mean, that was kind of the point. The first year when me and Clay were
Sure.
both riding him.
Yeah. And at 19, I mean, you were gonna rodeo at that point. I mean, I'm just trying to, what was going on in your life as a 19-year-old header? Um, that
Not a
Walt was
dang
kind of the
thing.
perfect storm. Yeah.
Not a thing at 19.
Yeah.
I think I turned 20 right at the start of that year, first year I
Hmm.
made the finals. But I mean, I've been dreaming since I was a kid. And you rope what they had. You remember the rock and ropers? You're probably too young for that. The little
Yeah,
pipe
those are
dummies.
before my time.
They're called fast lanes now.
Yeah.
So yeah, well they didn't have the cool heads on them then. But I mean, you'd rope the dummy in the backyard, dreaming of someday going to the NFR. So that's what I wanted to do
Hmm.
from the time I was young. I wanted to make the NFR. Well, he was he was kind of the point where, because the year before I was so sick of heading because I didn't have a very good head horse, and heading was zero fun for me. And he was kind of one, and getting to rope with my dad that summer before I even bought him kind of got me to liking heading again. I was riding my brother's head horse, and it was kind of fun again. And then he was the one that kind of kept me heading.
Hmm.
And that was, I didn't have anything else to do. I wanted to go rodeo. I wanted to be gone all the time, and I had nothing to be home for. So it was kind of the perfect time for me.
Now, tell me what you said. You didn't have anything, but did you know your wife at the time, or did Walt come before your wife?
Walt came before my wife.
Walt came before your wife. That's cool. Did Walt help you? Did she like Walt from the beginning? Was she kind
Oh
of the hook,
yeah.
like a puppy dog?
Yeah, and you know what? If you would spend 5 minutes around him, anybody loved him. I mean,
Hmm.
he spent some time at the vet after a colic, and I mean that he was their favorite
Hmm.
horse in there. And I mean, he was just one of those horses that you thought he could speak. I mean, he just
Hmm.
knew what was going on. He's just well mannered. Um, you enjoyed being around him. He'd give you everything he got, whatever you wanted, whatever you asked of him, and
Hmm.
I mean, so yeah, she loved him. She kept him going. She was a huge part of keeping him going because she took care of him as good as anybody could take care of a horse.
Now, what were some of the things that he needed extra care for? I mean, did he have any leg problems? You said he colicked. Give me some of his health history before he
Well,
died.
the first the first little deal that he had no issues, tendons, nothing like that. I mean, he was the way he run. I think he never put any pressure on his joints, but he did have ring bone.
Mm-hmm.
And about the third year I was riding him, would have been 2000, well, fifth year I was riding him, I guess. 2005 is when it got really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to the point he couldn't hardly walk. And, um, and that's when Dr. Greg Veneclausen did some experimental deal on him, and it ended up fusing the joint. Well, when it
Mm-hmm.
fused the joint, then he was good. So as far as the only other thing that he ever had before that that was an issue was he would tie up on you.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to feed him. He loved his alfalfa, but I had to feed him a small flake in the morning, small flake at night, and I would feed him a half a 5-gallon bucket of equine senior morning and night.
Hmm. And
And
that
that's the
kept him.
only that kept him from tying up. And if I just fed him alfalfa or something, he probably tied up on me 7 or 8 times before that, and then I think he tied up on me one time after that the rest of his career. So that was his only really
Mm-hmm.
issue. And then he had the ring bone issue, and that
Mm-hmm.
was he was out for about 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
And once he come back, I mean, he didn't require anything. I'd get his hocks injected every 4 or 5 months, and that was about it. I'd had to shoe him every consistently because his foot would grow in
Mm-hmm.
because his pastern was fused. But other than that, I mean, as low maintenance as you could get.
Now, you shot him, or did somebody
I did
else shoot him?
not. Oh
No.
no, heck no. Are you kidding me?
I don't know. I don't
I
know
don't
if
want.
you're a shooter,
I
Travis.
don't want the responsibility of that.
Yeah. Gotcha.
No, Eric Thomas in Amarillo did a good job. I mean, he did a really good job. In fact, I would drive him there because it was important to get it done right, just so it
Mm-hmm.
didn't put the pressure on. We didn't know how good if it was fused or if it would, we didn't know. This was all experimental, so we had no idea how long it would last or if it would last. So we would get him shot every 6 weeks, and if we had to maybe fly Eric into Billings, or if Hillary would have to drive down to Amarillo, if I was busy rodeoing, then we'd just have to do it, and it was just what we did until he died.
Well, okay, so you were 19 when you got him. Pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of 19-year-olds don't necessarily know the best way to take care of a horse. Was it a learning curve for you, or was your dad really adamant early on about horse care? Like, did you?
Well, I mean, you knew how to take care of one, but like, do you truly know how to take care of a head horse until you get
Mm-hmm.
out there and rodeo? I don't think you do.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing is Clay had been out there and rodeoed a little bit, so we were
Mm-hmm.
kind of traveling around, so that helped. You learn some of the stuff, how to manage him, and the main thing with like like where you travel, what you do with them, and how you rope on them. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the main thing. How I think you take care of one and take care of good head horses. There are times that you don't need to reach a long ways and do that when you got a rodeo. If you're trying to win 200 or 500 and you got Reno the next day, well, you don't want to just bomb out on him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of manage him that way. And until you get out there and do it, it's, uh, it's just kind of a learning experience. And I had Clay there and he helped out a lot. And so I just kind of leaned on that and then watch the other guys. You watch what Speed did, watch what T. Woolman did. Those guys were out there. So you pay attention and learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. That first NFR that you made on him, was he a grand entry horse too, or did you guys bring a grand entry horse?
He was my grand entry
He
horse,
was
and
yours.
then yes, yeah, because I only owned one. See, I
Mhm.
rodeoed my whole first year on one head horse, no
That's
backup.
awesome.
Yeah, no backup plan. I guess Clay had one, so we kind of used it. We between the two of us, we had two horses,
Hmm.
and maybe he bought one later on in the year, so maybe there was three between the two of us. But oh, he was deathly terrifying to ride as a grand entry horse and a victory lap horse. Terrifying. You honestly, towards the end of it, I got wise to it because you take a victory lap in the go round, and in fact, I lost my hat the first time because I was about to run over Tom Feller. If you guys
Oh my
know him,
gosh.
yeah, I lost my hat going out the gate the very first time, the first go round I won because he was just running off with me, and I went to put it back on, about run over Tom Feller. So,
How
I
much fun
stayed.
did everybody else? Did they make fun of you, or did
No,
you?
they made fun of me for losing my hat, of
Yeah,
course.
that's what
But
I
yeah,
mean. Yeah,
yeah,
did
of
you take a
course.
beating for losing your hat? I feel like
Oh
that.
yeah, sure. Wade Wheatley got on me pretty good about that. That's all right. That's good fun, man. That was what are friends for?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, and then later on in the NFR, you want to go around. I had my other horse sitting there waiting, and I
Mm-hmm.
would get off him so I could actually enjoy the victory lap. Other than that, I would just be on two hands pulling. And
Mm-hmm.
when you had to rebuild at the NFR before they changed it in 2009, if I missed one, he
Mm-hmm.
would run off. I couldn't even hardly build my loop. He would run off until he got to the spot, until he got next to the steer, then he'd slow down. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
build my loop. Basically, it felt like he was running off, and then once he's then he'd chill out once he got to his spot. But he could not idle to a steer, and that I think that's honestly what made him great. I think it bothered him. You couldn't score and just, hey, I'm just going to kind of lope 40 feet behind the steer. He just was going to go to a spot, and he couldn't idle. There was no idle in him until he got to the spot where you were going to rope.
Did he ever make a kid's horse? Like, was
No,
there? No, he
no,
never. No.
no. I mean, you could sit there and hold your kid on top of him, but I mean, he wasn't. No. Would you
Yeah.
ever? I would never, ever, ever, ever turn a kid loose on him
No.
because I know he would run off. No, without a doubt, he would run off.
I guess that's a special one that makes
Yeah.
him good, huh?
Well, he wouldn't hurt you as long as you
Yeah.
stayed on, but if you fell off, it might hurt. But I mean, if as long as you stayed on him, you were going to be good. But I mean, there's no way I would put a kid on him.
Mm-hmm.
And Walt Vermendal told me that. He said he's not a kid's horse. He will not be a kid's horse.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I don't want a kid's horse.
Now, you obviously mounted out your brother quite a bit. Clay rode him. Trevor rode him. Did a lot of guys hop on him? Did you let people ride him often, or was it he had enough
Uh,
work?
no, I mean, a lot of guys rode him. Matt Tyler rode him. I know Charles Pogue rode him. Steve Purcell rode him. At the beginning, a lot of guys rode him. Wade Wheatley rode him. Kevin Daniels. Um, Trying to think who else did. And then Clay rode him a bunch. I don't know who else. I know I'm probably forgetting someone. Yeah, at the beginning. Um, he got, but once after he come back from his ring bone, I didn't. Only like a couple guys got on him after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just because I was like, man, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to run a bunch of runs on him. You know, I'm going to run the least amount of runs possible on him just because I don't know. I don't know what it entails. And he lasted 3 years or 3.5 years after that. So,
Sure. Did you won so much on him. You won everywhere. It didn't matter what size of pen. But did you have a favorite place to ride him? I mean, you won Pendleton, Cheyenne, like
yeah, Cheyenne probably was the easiest money in the world on him.
I bet. Yeah.
Probably the easiest money. If you're going to say I needed to make a car payment or a truck payment or anything, I would probably say, yeah, put me at Cheyenne, just because I'm going to have the advantage no matter what. You know, you got the shorter
Sure.
scores, or you say you have a normal setup, a 16-foot barrier or a 16-foot box. There's guys that can make some runs, and your horse doesn't necessarily make the difference. Well, Cheyenne, he made the difference. And
Sure.
if, gosh, I can't even hardly remember a time that I didn't win anything there, or at least have the opportunity to win something there. And
Yeah.
since he's been gone, it's been really hard at Cheyenne. Cheyenne hasn't been as easy. We'll just say that.
Didn't you have
Cheyenne's felt a
trouble
lot
getting to
tougher.
Cheyenne? Didn't you have
Yeah,
trouble getting to Cheyenne one year? Like, weren't you? Is there
sure
a
did.
story about that?
Yeah, yeah, we did.
I understand. No, that's for a later date,
Is that
but
for another podcast?
that could be for another. No, I mean, if you have that story, I remember you guys were running. Didn't you take a
We
Jeep?
took they have a courtesy car at the airport in Laramie, and the guy, the pilot that was supposed to fly us to Cheyenne, he decided he wasn't going to because there was an air show and he could land there, but they wouldn't let him take off. So he refused to take us to Cheyenne, and we're paying this guy.
Yeah.
And we're coming from Ogden, and then we landed in Laramie, probably right when the performance started.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have a rental car there. We do not. That's like 10 minutes away. And so All I know is I got thrown some keys to a courtesy van because one of the pilots said, "Hey, you guys need it more than we do." So I took it because I guess I had the family, most of the family, so I was the responsible one. And then we drove it and put the little yellow blinking light
I
on the
remember
top of
there.
it, so people would get out of our way on the interstate. And
That's what I remember. I remember the blinking light.
yeah, so then yeah, we I told the guys, I said, well, you guys are going to bail me out if we get in trouble for this one. So I said, but they threw me the keys, so we were willing to chance it, and we showed up about 3 bulldoggers before they team roped.
Yeah, I remember I was standing there taking pictures and I pinned your back numbers on
Yes.
and I remember how panicked that was. I sorry for the diversion, but I
No, no,
when you
we're good.
brought up Cheyenne, I was like, "Oh gosh, I just remembered that." That was
Yeah, and then
hilarious.
my steer hit the barrier and run right down the left fence, and I'm like, that's not how it's supposed to end. It's supposed to be a lot better story than that one.
Yeah, it still makes a decent story. It would have
Yeah, it
been
was
more
still
fun
all
if
right.
you'd have won Cheyenne and made the final.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh man. All right, back to Walt. Do you have a most like a moment that when you think about Walt, it's what you think about, like an NFR or a rodeo win or anything that like obviously Cheyenne you said was easy money, but what was most meaningful in the time that you rode Walt or a memory or anything like
Oh, the George Strait roping I mean, that was the most meaningful one. And when I was 3-5 to put me back in the world title race there in the 8th round with Petska,
that? Hmm.
that was those 2 moments right there. Um, Man, the George Strait when I won first and second, it was, man, you could just, I knew it when I started the roping. You could just, he would let you do anything you wanted. Well, the steers were pretty fresh. Well, a lot of these guys, man, that you got to be decently fast to get qualified. So your horse, that was one thing he was good about is he could be really fast the day before. Well, then he'd come back. Well, we roped pretty fresh steers. Well, a lot of guys were jerking them down. They can't
Yeah.
keep them on their feet or they're making them really hard to heel. Well, when I saw that, I there was a couple guys that I knew headers that were going to make it maybe kind of tough, and my brother was one, and he had a horse that would allow him to do that. Chad Masters was the other one. There was probably one other guy in there too. Um, I can't remember right now offhand, but I know those two guys had the horses that were, two of the best horses that you were going to have to compete against because even though you wrote fast, your horse had to hold up and stay with them just to keep them healable. Well, once I got through the first round, I'm like, man, that was just, you could just feel it. And he would just do whatever he wanted to do. And that point was really neat. Plus, when it come down in your first and second high call, I knew that he was going to do good.
Yeah.
And when you know that what you're riding is going to make the right decision, no matter what I did, he was going to do good, that the confidence there is second to none. And then, so then that turned out really good, and that was a huge win. And then as far as like the 8th round at the NFR, when we had to get back in it, and the 3-6 is winning it, I think, and we needed to win the round really to get back in it, and we had the steer to do it. That was just another moment that was just, just typical of what he was. I mean, when you get in those big moments, he was better or just as good as he's always been in those big moments. Even if I was a nervous wreck, he wasn't. So
Do you believe, I don't know if it's anthropomorphizing too much, but do you believe that horses that he knew the big moments or it didn't matter to him?
I think so. Yeah. Well, I mean, they can feel a fly on their back. They can dang sure feel if my adrenaline's going for
Yeah.
sure.
Hmm.
And I know how I felt in those situations. So as far as like, but it didn't affect him. If it affected him, it affected him in a positive way. And I've been on horses where I've been felt the same way, and it hasn't worked out near as good. Come the short round, they get to, they'll get quick on you, or they won't score. They'll take off early, and he just wasn't like that. He was just, man. It was just you had a comfort right there between him and me, and whoever got on him. Usually, if they would just let him do what he was going to do.
Did you take anything for granted? Looking back now, do you think you took him for granted at all?
I didn't take him for granted. I think a little bit what I did was, um, I don't know if I mean, I practiced my butt off, but I don't know if I pushed myself enough to get better roping wise.
Hmm.
Um, because I worked on the shots that he was going to provide me,
I see.
and I perfected them. What I think I felt like I did, I got them, and I was like, man, this is where I'm going to get. This is kind of the area I'm going to get. When I was like, I don't think I worked hard enough on something that, but I didn't take it for granted. I just don't think I pushed myself to expand my roping, I guess, to what I, you know, was going to end up riding eventually.
Yeah.
And that's something that I had to work on quite a bit after he was gone. And I wish I would worked on it more, so it would have been a little smoother transition.
Would it? Can you take us to the day that you lost him?
Yeah.
Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that day and what was going on and what
Yeah.
point of the year?
That day sucked. Honestly, it really
Yeah.
did. It wasn't a good day. It's just, and you know, a lot of things happened, and it was actually a blessing that this happened. But I remember warming him up. Clovis slack, beautiful day out. It was back to back. We're about, I don't know, 8, 10 bulldoggers away from team roping, and I always blew him out. Like I blew him out every time before I run, because that's just when he felt his best to just get him going. Well, I blew him out in the warm up arena, and I just didn't feel like. I was like, man, he just didn't feel like he. So I was like, I'll do it again. And I ain't the first time that's happened. Well, when I get done blowing him out the second time, then it's like he spooked at a shadow, and then he
Yeah.
didn't stop spooking in a shadow, and then I knew. And yeah, so we probably made it a good 60, 70 feet side passing, not wanting to go down, and then we ended up on the back of a drag or whatever they work the arena with at
Yeah.
Clovis, which I got out of there pretty clean. I don't know how I got out of there pretty clean, but he ended up laying on the drag. So I mean, you know, looking back on it, I like to think, well, you never did hit the ground. So, you know, I mean, and he didn't freak out, and it was like he didn't want to go down, and that's just kind of how he was. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was a hard moment for the family. So I'm glad my
Was
wife
Hillary?
didn't see it.
Yeah, that
So
was going to ask. She wasn't there.
she was there. She just
She was
didn't
there.
see it. She was in the stands, and it happened behind the stands. So, you know, that was just a bad deal. So that
Um,
was the end of my 3 month stretch where I lost my good yellow horse to call, or I didn't lose him, but he was done after that. And then I lost my other horse to liver disease. And then he was the last one. And I left with a crippled practice horse and a pony
ugh.
leaving California.
Did you bury him in California or did they
I
have to take
did.
him?
Burt McGill's got him underneath an oak tree. He did a great job. He took him and he buried him in a beautiful spot. And I mean, shoot, it was fitting. I mean, he's in a cool spot. People go out there and see where he's buried. It's pretty neat.
That is neat. That is neat. Ugh. Were you there when you buried him or did you go say
No,
goodbye?
no. I got
Oh,
the
I'm losing.
shoes.
Hey. Yeah, Caitlin, come in. Hey, I'm losing. Hey, Travis, I'm losing you.
I think Hunter Cure maybe got his shoes
Oh,
off. I
hey.
think that's who got his shoes off for me. And
Hey,
I got a
we lost you for
deal.
a second.
It's
Hey.
delayed for me, so okay now.
Are you there, Travis?
If I just, man, I was, I don't know. I didn't, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go through that.
Can you hear him? I can't hear
So,
him. I'll text him. Travis, can you hear me? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you a little bit. You're like muffled, or you're like an echo. Oh. Sure do. You. Can we let it go and then get another one rolling?
Are you there?
I'm
gonna eject him and tell him to re-click the link.
Okay. It's still live though.
Is he coming back on?
Hey, it's not letting him join, Caitlin.